All right, well, welcome to the start of some heavy vocabulary work coming up in the next few weeks. This week we're going to focus on context clues, and keep in mind that this is not something that you're going to get just after a week. It's about recognizing and understanding how you're looking at words and how you're looking at how language is being used in general in terms of context clues. There are lots of things in the journal folder for this week. And then you're going to be using some of these different techniques in class, and then we'll carry this over into next week, of course, as well. But I wanted to spend a little bit of time on the idea of context clues because this is what we need as writers and what we need as readers as well, as we're going through lots of academic work. So let's take a look here. So in general for vocabulary, your reading is going to be made easier if you know more words. That should make sense. And then the more reading you do, the more words you're going to learn. But you've got to take that time and really engage with the language itself in order to become a better reader, more efficient, stronger, however you want to refer to that. So dealing with context, we deal with this when we talk about grammar. We're going to deal with this when we talk about reading. And we want to start focusing on using context clues for words that we're not familiar with, because sometimes we just simply don't have the ability to check a definition. And this also forces us to really pay attention to what the author is saying, and then we can go ahead and step back and really think about what that means. But we have to realize that our own background and experiences will also be able to help us with dealing with unfamiliar words. And again, this goes back to this idea of metacognition. How are we learning? How do we think? What's our kind of normal process for attacking these sorts of things? So context, when you come across a word that you don't know when you're reading, the first step really is to take a look at context clues. Because if you head right to a dictionary, you may lose what the rest of the sentence is actually trying to say. So the idea of context clues really is considering what is around the word. And what else appears in the sentence or in the nearby sentences, or in some cases in the entire article. What are we referring to? So there are some basic structures that you can keep in mind as we start talking about context clues. And this is the idea of, can you find a definition embedded or within the piece that you're reading? Are there synonyms, words that are the same in their meaning that might help you out? Are there antonyms, things that show the opposite relationship? Maybe there's providing examples or explanations, or even describing an experience of something. And then also your knowledge of the subject will come into play, and then other combinations of these things will help you determine meaning within a piece. So I'm going to highlight some of the most important ones, and you'll be using some of these techniques as you do some work for your journal this week. So sometimes a writer is going to provide a definition for you somewhere within the sentence, and there are going to be clue words that indicate this. If you see a word like is or means, or in other words can be defined as, you're likely looking at a definition within your piece. And we'll be using these techniques also when we do our own writing, so it's important to understand this. So here's an example. Brick made of sun-dried clay is. So is in math is an equal sign. So is in writing is again linking us to a description in this case. So sun-dried clay is called adobe. So if you didn't know what adobe was before, you can determine based on the context clues that it is sun-dried clay. And in this case, I've also provided a picture. So again, you want to try to use combinations of things in order to figure out some of those words that maybe you're not as familiar with. If you're thinking about the idea of a synonym, that word itself is easy to remember because S for same, something that is similar in meaning. So again, you're using some of these connecting words like also or and, transitional pieces similarly, or to, TOO. And if you see these words, we might be looking at the issue of a synonym. So here's an example. The Zuni built their homes with brick made of sun-dried clay. The Hopi also, so in addition to, used adobe to build their homes. So again, we're connecting this idea of sun-dried clay and adobe with that transition word of also between the two sentences using this similarity. So antonyms. Antonyms are words that mean opposite, and so some of your clue words for this are going to be words like but or yet, however, even though. And again, you're going to see these when we start looking at other sentence construction. So the good news is that you're not going to get lots of different information. You're going to see the same sorts of words showing up in different ways, and then that's how you're going to make the connection for what they actually do for us as we're reading and we're writing. So if we see a word like this, we're likely looking at something that's opposite. So the Hopi lived in single-family houses, but, so something that's contrary, something that's opposite, the Iroquois lived in long houses. So we would have to know that a single-family house was for one family, but a long house had multiple families in them. So that's showing that relationship using an opposite idea. Examples. These are things that we might use to illustrate the meaning of a word. And again, clue words like for example or for instance, including, again, some of these transitional pieces that we're going to use pretty regularly as we start our writing as well. So an example for this one, the Pueblo people grew many crops. So these crops, we're going to provide some examples of what were they. They were corn, beans, and squash. And so again, we're relating that list, that such as list, to what these crops are. So we're getting the full context based on those examples. And this is why details are so important as we read and we write. So some other techniques that you're going to run across, issues of explanation. It's going to be similar to a definition. And the writer may actually give you an explanation of what that word means. Maybe not necessarily the dictionary definition, but how it's being used. The idea of knowledge of a subject is that there's enough familiarity of the subject to discover the meaning of the word. And so this is something where, as you're doing some of your readings over the course of this semester, you may find that you read an article, and even though you may understand what all the words mean, maybe the full context of the piece is escaping you because you don't have the rest of the background knowledge. So the things that I read that are published pieces within educational magazines or blogs or those sorts of things are relying on my my knowledge of the subject. And so coming into it, stepping into it, it may be difficult. So this is why it's always confusing when you start a new job or you get into a new position, because you have to learn a whole bunch of new stuff in order to manage that. So it's just becoming familiar with it. So for what you want to really focus on here is the idea that you want to employ these strategies, and you're going to have a chance to do this on this week's journal. Reread the sentence that contains the word, unknown word, and look for some of those signal words or look for punctuation that may lead you to one of these context clues. You can reread the sentence before and after where that word is, and that may give you that space. You can consider all of the clues and see, well, maybe this is what it means. And then if you think that works, you can actually put that idea or that meaning or that new word into the original sentence to actually see if it makes sense for you. So all of these techniques are going to be used or could be used as you do some work this week. And I'm going to put another quick video in on how to do this week's journal and how it relates back to what you're going to be posting for me. So this is all about context clues. There are lots of other resources in this week's folder. I would encourage you to go through those, and we can talk about them in class as well. Take care.